Herb. Herb is a plant. I mean, herbs are good for everything. Herb.
Welcome to Eugene Cannabis TV. You made it to episode 643. Can you believe it? Here we are on April 3rd, no, not 19, it's 2017. So, anyway, you got Dank as head, and got some news stories for you. Let me do a few announcements here real quick. Again, I talked about this the last show, Oregon Marijuana Business Conference at the Valley River Inn in Eugene, and that's on April 28th, one-day event. And the tickets are a little spendy, $149 for the conference or $249 if you want an all-inclusive pass. But anyway, that's there for those business types in the marijuana business. And the, let's see, the Portland NORML is meeting on the second Monday of every month at 8 o'clock in Portland. So, legislative committee. So that's something. If you're up in Portland or have family in Portland, you might let them know about that. And the third annual Oregon Hempfest down at Roseburg. It used to be the Umpqua Hempfest, so now it's the third annual Oregon Hempfest, and now with a little R behind it because now they're trademarked into the Seattle Hempfest. Seattle Hempfest trademarked the name Hempfest. Not sure how they did that, but I guess they did. So. I guess now if you're going to use the word Hempfest, you got to have the little R behind it. But nobody's saying anything to me about it yet, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, that's great people down there at Roseburg, and that's let's see, admission is $20 a day. That includes camping. It's on private land, so it doesn't get much better than that. So anyway, let me. We've had our friend Elvie Musica on the show many times. Elvie is one of 4 federal medical marijuana patients that is being supplied by her marijuana by the federal government. There's four patients living. I've forgotten how many it was to start with, but anyway, we're down to 4 now. And so anyway, this pertains to Elvie. This is what we're talking about is her medicine that comes from the federal government. And this is in the Oregon Cannabis Connection, written by William Stash Jones. Titled Moldy Government Marijuana Prompts Action from the NIDA. This is dated the 27th of March this year. The National Institute of Drug Abuse, NIDA, has determined that they have mold in their weed. The federal agency has been cultivating marijuana for research since the 1970s and is in the only authorized facility to obtain cannabis for research purposes. For years, researchers have complained about the potency and quality of the medicine coming from the facility, which is located at the University of Mississippi in a well-secured area. There have been other stories about the quality of the government cannabis. The Washington Post recently did a feature on the NIDA cannabis, and it showed many deficiencies in the product, from the lower THC levels to strains that are very limited. The operation in Mississippi is not up to par with the state-of-the-art facilities in legal marijuana states like Colorado, Oregon, and California. And this is from the NIDA themselves. The National Institute on Drug Abuse has supplied marijuana to researchers through our drug supply program for over 40 years without any known health consequences from contaminants. Questions have recently been raised about mold levels in NIDA-supplied marijuana. All plant materials contain mold and yeast, which are naturally occurring in air and soil. There is currently no universally accepted standard for levels of mold and yeast on marijuana, and different health organizations set cutoffs for acceptable levels spanning an enormous range from 500 to 200,000 colony-forming units, which is CFU/G. In response, NIDA is conferring with the Food and Drug Administration to determine what analysis and specifications are appropriate for NIDA-supplied marijuana. So we'll see how that goes. I haven't talked to Elvie lately to see how her medicine is now. I know it's for a long time it was really poor, and then for a while she said it was actually pretty good, and then it went bad again. So it's kind of interesting to see what the government produces, you know. And then speaking of health problems with marijuana, we follow along with this story, which is in the Oregonian, written by Noel Corambi. Noel Corambi writes, I think, most of the cannabis stories for the Oregonian. This is dated March 17th, titled "Lawmakers Press Governor Brown, Public Health Officials to Keep Pot Pesticide Rules." A group of Oregon lawmakers has sent a letter to Governor Kate Brown and public health officials urging them to preserve Oregon's pesticide testing requirements. The legislators said they shared grave concern over proposed rule changes which scale back testing requirements for cannabis extracts. The group said it wants the Oregon Health Authority to keep current rules in place. Lawmakers said they're particularly concerned about the impact of rule changes on the marijuana testing industry. These consistently changing rules have made it very difficult for those businesses to continue to operate, let alone make the investments needed to continue to expand, they wrote. The bipartisan group signing last week's letter were Republican Andy Olson, Republican in Albany, Senator Jeff Cruz, Republican, Roseburg, Representative Jeff Cruz, that's Representative Carl Wilson, which is a Republican, Carl Wilson, Grants Pass, Senator Laurie Moniz Anderson, Democrat in Gresham. Anyway, don't need to read all of them. Anyway, so Olson, Cruz, and Wilson were the only members of the 10-member Joint Committee on Marijuana Implementation to sign the letter. So think of that. There's only 2 out of 10. And the Marijuana Implementation Committee, we could do a whole other show on that one. But anyway, the Health Authority seeks pesticide rules for both medical and recreational marijuana. Among the proposed changes to the rules, instead of requiring that every batch of marijuana extract and concentrate be screened for pesticide contamination, the products would be randomly tested annually, but all of the marijuana used to make these products would first be screened for pesticides. The state also has proposed new rules for marijuana flower headed to the market. Current rules require about 33% of all batches of marijuana flower for the recreational system be tested for pesticides. The change would give authority to the Oregon Liquor Control Commission to require less testing. Under the proposal, at least 20% of marijuana flower would undergo pesticide testing. In the medical marijuana system, 100% of medicinal flower batches still would undergo pesticide testing. Changes to the pesticide testing requirements continue to be politically charged, with some labs pressing for more testing and some marijuana producers, processors, and retailers arguing for less. Don Morris, who represents the Oregon Cannabis Business Council and Association of Marijuana Businesses, said many feel the current rules overreach. Keeping it in this way is stymieing the industry, said Morris, a Portland store owner. He said the people pressing to keep the rules in place are lobbying in their own best interests. A few labs have formed to a political action committee, Oregonians for Public Health and Safety. Lobbyist Caleb Hayes, who represents the group, said the organization also includes the Oregon Sun-Grown Growers Guild, which is comprised of outdoor growers. This is in the interest of public health and safety, period, Hayes said. We collectively feel these testing rules are the wrong direction for Oregon. So the controversy continues. The person referenced, Donald Morris, not one of my favorite people. To me, he's one of the marijuana business people that makes a bad name for marijuana business people, personally. I'm more of a patient advocate myself, but anyway, that's another story. So, speaking of another story, this one here is written by Anthony Taylor, and Anthony Taylor is with the Compassionate Oregon. He's a lobbyist and marijuana patient himself, and anyway, does a lot of work in this. And this is Oregon medical marijuana growers not to blame for the black market. In response to the Oregon State Police report about Oregon's continuing role in the marijuana black market, Senate Majority Leader Ginny Burdick, co-chair of the Joint Committee on Marijuana Regulation, expressed to the Oregonian, medical marijuana growers are a chief source of black market cannabis leaving the state. She's confident that tight regulation of the recreational marijuana program is keeping it from leaking out of the system. The senator's sentiments are inaccurate, and they represent what is currently happening in Oregon's marijuana market and unfairly puts the blame on medical marijuana growers. She fails to address hundreds of grow operations across the state operating under the cover of the legal system and the thousands of home grows that produce amounts in excess of the legal limits without painting medical growers with a very broad brush regarding their role in this situation. More importantly, though, the state's very own regulatory systems, especially seed-to-sale tracking, was designed and lauded as being the right approach to reduce just such leakage. It has not succeeded in doing so. Production levels for cannabis in Oregon were already outstripping demand prior to the passage of Measure 91 in 2014. What the resulting tight regulation of the recreational marijuana program put in place for the adult use market just added a whole new sector of marijuana production to the picture. This new production sector, as predicted, rapidly added to this excess. This oversupply, alongside new regulatory requirements that bottlenecked the supply chain for months, resulted in many growers and producers finding themselves with an inventory that was just sitting there. Still, for many, it has now been in inventory for months and is affecting its market value. Meanwhile, these growers face the ongoing struggle to meet the day-to-day expenses of running a business, where they are unable to deduct those expenses and have no real access to banking, forcing industry into cash-only business models that only add to the difficulty of tracking illegal activities. Add to this, investors expecting immediate and substantial returns on investments are finding instead that these investments are eating up capital like wildfire through dry grass with little hope of promised riches, and with all that inventory still just sitting there, the temptation for diversion is even for those operating within the confines of the regulated system may be tough to resist if the alternate is the loss of their business. These are the real factors to play here in Oregon's medical regulated marijuana markets, and blaming the medical marijuana growers as the chief source of black market cannabis leaving the state ignores these relevant factors in a much bigger equation. As patient advocates, Compassionate Oregon worries that placing the blame for Oregon's diversion problems at the feet of the medical growers without recognizing these factors jeopardizes our medical program and puts Oregon's medical cannabis patients at risk. And I'll continue this on the second half of the show. I want to remind you that this is Dank, and this is Eugene Cannabis TV, and this is episode 643, and I'll be right back for the rest of this story, so don't go away. Welcome to the second half of the Eugene Cannabis TV, episode 643. You got Dank, and we were just going over the story. It was in the Oregon Cannabis Connection, written by Anthony Taylor, titled Oregon Medical Marijuana Grows Not to Blame for the Black Market. Changes to the medical program over the last several sessions have also put patients under unnecessary stress, worrying if they will continue to have safe and reasonable access to the medications they need. As patient advocates, we also worry, especially in light of recent comments from U.S. Attorney Jeff Sessions, about how Oregon's inability to get a handle on this situation will affect Oregon's top-ranked medical marijuana program and its ability to continue to meet the ongoing needs of our medical cannabis patients. We hope it does not result in irreparable harm to the nation's highly recognized medical marijuana program. It is hard for patients to sit quietly unnoticed as the state continues to struggle to control the unintended consequences of the new regulatory system for adult use and its impact on these patients. Everything we do in Oregon to regulate markets affects patients. Let's not forget that. So that's a great article by Anthony Taylor and brings up some great points. Anyway, the fight continues, and we don't know where it's going yet. And speaking of Jeff Sessions, I've got the current copy of the Freedom Leaf magazine here, and the editor's note on Sessions is contemplating Sessions. He says, although newly approved Attorney General Jeff Sessions seemed obsessed with marijuana, at press time he had yet to make an official statement on the subject. Instead, the task of explaining the administration's position has fallen to President Trump's embattled press secretary, the hapless Sean Spicer. In response to reporters' questions on February 23rd, he typically made a mess of it, trying to link recreational marijuana to opiate abuse. For the good news, Spicer gave a green light to medical marijuana, more explicit than any previous administration, and he even seemed to call for the renewal of the Roseburg-Farr Amendment, which prevents the feds from intervening in medical marijuana in the states. However, regarding recreational use, we got a vague threat. I do believe we will see greater enforcement of it. There is still a federal law that we need to abide by when it comes to recreational marijuana. Pardon us if we don't panic, because Sessions is, after all, a politician who follows the polls, and each day they show ever greater support for completely legalizing marijuana. On the same day as Spicer's presser, Quinnipiac University released a poll that shows a whopping 71% of voters oppose the government enforcing federal laws against marijuana in states that have already legalized medical or recreational marijuana. So that's 71%. That's pretty good. The real wild card is the president himself. Where does he stand on marijuana? Trump talks a lot about getting rid of drugs, but seldom mentions pot. He's for medical use, but is concerned about bad things happening in legal states like Colorado and Washington. Alan St. Pierre, who writes about Sessions on page 30 of the current issue here, thinks PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel, a Republican and Trump supporter, might have some sway over Trump's pot policy. St. Pierre told Marijuana Times, if rumors are to be believed that Peter Thiel, a major cannabis space investor, will influence the selection of FDA commissioner, and that the next commissioner will be making a recommendation for descheduling cannabis or downscheduling cannabis at minimum from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2, then it's likely that Sessions will begrudgingly implement the change in policy. Well, we can hope. In addition to ruminating about the future of cannabis, Issue 23 delves into the lives of prisoners, many of whom are serving life sentences on marijuana charges. Cheryl Sicard has been working diligently with the Marijuana Lifer Project to get the word out, and Russ Billville interviews a grower, Eddie Lepp, who is now home after 8 years in jail. Lastly, it's March, which means, among other things, St. Patrick's Day. See, on page 68, Vancouver cannabis activist Watermelon makes her Freedom Leaf debut by reminiscing about her old stoner friend, Patty. So that's it remains to be seen. The latest on this is I read that Sessions was trying to gather information on medical patients in all the states that have the medical program. So that's got everybody just a little bit concerned. So time will tell. We don't know what's going to happen, and just hope for the best. Another article here is SCOTUS picked Gorsuch a moderate on cannabis. In his second week of office, President Trump nominated Judge Neil M. Gorsuch to fill the vacant Supreme Court seat. Unlike Antonin Scalia, whom he would place if confirmed by the Senate, Gorsuch is a conservative constitutionalist. He currently serves as a judge at the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit in Denver. Gorsuch has ruled on several marijuana-related cases, such as Neil Feinberg et al. Versus Commissioner of Internal Revenue, in which dispensary owners sued the IRS over typical tax deductions that cannabis companies under Tax Code Section 260E are barred from taking. Gorsuch ruled in favor of the IRS, deciding that the plaintiff failed to show that, quote, without an immediate remedy they will face an irreparable injury, unquote. The judge acknowledged the mixed message the federal government is sending these days about the distribution of marijuana, and indicated his familiarity with the complex conflict between state and federal laws, and the Cole and Ogden memos regarding marijuana policy issued by President Obama's Justice Department. In 2013, Gorsuch ruled against a dead man, Ryan Wilson, who was fatally tased by a police officer after he admitted that he possessed cannabis plants. Wilson's parents sued the police department for using excess force and lost. In 2010, Gorsuch showed no sympathy for a couple that claimed religious freedom as a defense against a charge of possession with intent to distribute marijuana. However, when it comes to the Fourth Amendment, Gorsuch is has a more moderate record. In a case where an officer found a pound of meth in a car, the judge ruled that the drugs were inadmissible as evidence because the officer violated the defendant's Fourth Amendment rights by relying on a license plate database that was known to be faulty. None of these cases shed much light on what Gorsuch really thinks about cannabis and the drug policy reform. A professor at the University of Colorado Law School since 2008, he's been described as widely respected among his disproportionately liberal peers, colleagues and students. So anyway, we don't know. The last I heard on that was they don't have enough votes to get him in, but unless the Republicans change the rules and have a smaller number that need to vote to get him in. So in other words, the Republicans are going to pull another one of their cons probably. So anyway, that's what we have there. And this is a great little magazine. If you can't find one, send me an email at dankbagman@hotmail.com, and I'll get sure you get one of these. Different articles, all of course cannabis related. Here's one titled NORML Pushes for Workplace Drug Testing Policy Reforms. This is written by Ellen Komp. Ever since 2012, when state laws legalizing the adult use of marijuana began to be passed, people have been contacting NORML chapters across the country wondering if they're now protected against employment drug testing. Unfortunately, for most people, the answer is no. Or at best, not yet. California's failed Proposition 19 to legalize adult use in 2010 specifically protected employees' rights, which prompted strong opposition from business groups. Subsequent legalization measures, including California's Prop 64, which passed last year, have either been silent on the issue or contain language stating that the measure does not affect employer policies of restricting consumption of marijuana by employees. Maine's new adult use law includes such language, but also states that an employer may not refuse to employ someone over 21 for consuming marijuana outside of work. On the medical front, in 2008, in the Ross versus Raging Wire telecommunications case, the California Supreme Court decided that the state's medical marijuana law does not protect employees against workplace discrimination. The Supreme Courts of Oregon and Washington have issued similar rulings. 11 states have language in their medical marijuana laws protecting patients from employment discrimination. Arizona, Arkansas, Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, Maine, Minnesota, Nevada, New York, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. These laws do not apply to workers in safety-sensitive positions who are still subject to mandatory urine testing under federal law. Reformers in Oregon and Washington are backing bills to protect marijuana users' rights in the workplace. Oregon's Senate Bill 301, proposed by Employment Law Attorney Ben Crichton and the NORML Legal Committee Attorney Leland-Berger, applies the same language that protects cigarette smokers against workplace discrimination to all state legal marijuana use. Washington's House Bill 1094, sponsored by Washington NORML, would protect medical marijuana patients from employment discrimination. California NORML hopes to sponsor a similar bill modeled on a measure that was vetoed by former Governor Schwarzenegger in 2008. So that remains to be seen. Leland-Berger, I remember him telling me some years ago that the medical marijuana law will not protect you from being fired for having pot in your system. It will not protect you from being discriminated against by housing. All the medical marijuana law does is keep you from going to jail. That's the only thing it does. So people's rights and patients' rights are still an issue, and we still have to fight on those. So let's hope that the SB 301 here in Oregon passes. It's probably an uphill battle, and I wouldn't bet on it, but I'm glad it's out there. So if we don't get it this year, and maybe we'll get it next. This is going to be a yearly fight. Every year they're going to keep trying to tear down our laws, and we keep trying to improve them. So that's the fight. Anyway, come on, see us the next show. Come on to visit. You got Dank here, and I'll be here. Hope you will be.